Okay, let's bring in Mark Dunphy, who is standing by in Auckland. Just met him an hour ago in the tech check. Mark, welcome to the show.
Tom, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Before I play this first video, it's this New Zealand Herald video that kind of summarizes what's going on with the nasty stoush, as they called it. You go back. I didn't realize you go back to the Cup in 86, 85, 6, and 7 in WA. You were a supporter of Sir Michael, and you've got his boat behind you there, the big boat from the 88 campaign, but you go back even before that.
Yeah, well, it's been quite a ride, America's Cup wise. I'll never forget my first dinner in Sydney with Sir Michael, and Warren Jones and Ben Lexon, as decisions were being taken about New Zealand challenging. And Ben Lexon was a real character. He wasn't really much interested in what we were talking about over dinner. He spent most of the night trying to drop his cutlery through the gap in the floor so that the waitress had to keep coming and picking it up. And thought, oh, he was the guy who designed the wing keel. So there you go.
Well, some would debate that. He obviously had a big chunk of it, and the Dutch at the Netherlands Ship Model Basin had something to do with it. But those rules are gone. The nationality of the boats, in the internet, speaking of the internet, it would be impossible to police as code moves around the world, not quite at the speed of light, but almost, and computer designs and so on. But I didn't realize that you've lived virtually all over the world too in this ensuing period.
Yeah, well, I spent 20 years in Australia, and certainly enjoyed our first challenge in Australia, the mighty Kiwi Magic challenge, and the Plastic Fantastics, as they were called. And I'll never forget Dennis Connor saying, why would you build them unless you wanted to cheat? And I thought that was actually going a bit far at the time. But I know that in this particular sport, in this particular event, sometimes people say things perhaps that they don't really mean. They say it to rack other people up, and it just goes with the territory. So, but anyway, that was a great eye opener for us. And but when the decision was being taken about that first New Zealand challenge, the call was, did New Zealand have what it took to win? Because we knew that we had great sportsmen, great sailors. We were very, very good with design, but we knew we didn't have the money that necessarily everyone else in the world had. So did we, with the resources that we could muster, have the capability to win? And that was a difficult call, a gutsy call, really made principally by Sir Michael with David Rishwhite, and the answer was yes. And we're coming up when the 37th Cup sailed. New Zealand would have been competing for 40 years. So, and I think we'd all agree probably that New Zealand's been the most successful of the contestants for the Cup since it left Rhode Island. So we've got a proud history with the America's Cup that we all have to protect. And it's been such a wonderful thing for New Zealand and all of the Kiwis. Of course, we've had lots of thrills, and we've had our share of spills as well. But
how much in that period, from the first Kiwi Challenge in 86, 87? Remember the budgets in those days. I was, as you know, the executive director of New York Yacht Club Syndicate, and we were, along with Dennis Connor, probably the two biggest budgeted syndicates with the two biggest budgets. Ours was 16 million and change US. They had been 4 million in Newport in 83. They quadrupled to 16 million. And I don't know what your budget was. You must have some idea, but it would have been somewhere, give or take, 10 million Kiwi, wasn't it?
No. I think we would probably spend about the same money as you did there, because I was just looking at some of the photos, and I could see KZ7 trialing. We can put it up later, but KZ7 trialing against KZ3, and actually, if 7 was out against 3, I thought at that point in the regatta, but obviously pre-regatta, 7 and 5 were trialing. But no, I would think that our budget would have been about the same as yours. Sir Michael didn't ever like doing things in half measure, and were we going to do something, we would do it as well as we could. And so, yeah, same money, I would think.
How much money do you think has been spent between government sources, private sources, sponsors? How much do you think has been spent in this ensuing 40 years to keep the Kiwis and keep the Kiwi nation, keep New Zealand in the Cup and winning it?
Well, I wouldn't want to say too much, Tom, but
it's north of a billion Kiwi, isn't it?
Oh, yes. No, we've spent, in fact, I've had a good look at the numbers. We've spent in excess of $1.5 billion to today, and that money has come. The current team, so they've raised $500 million. The government's put in $500 million, and the rest of us, so starting with Sir Michael, David, and our challengers, another $500 million. Now that's Kiwi dollars, but a great deal for us really, and we've got a tremendous investment to protect on account of that.
Okay, well, let's talk about the stoush, as the New Zealand Herald called it, because you and what all of us thought was a very generous offer was when you made this 3, 4, 5 months ago now, and said, we really don't want the Cup to go offshore. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just to catch everybody up, and I'll raise whatever's necessary, the money to help bridge the gap between whatever money the team can raise and the government will support the event and the team. I'll raise the other, and that should keep the event here in New Zealand. And there are a lot of people who think the event should be at almost all costs. We've had people on the show say even a dignified loss in New Zealand is better than a win offshore. And we can debate all that, but let's go to this first video and bring everybody up to speed in case we have a lot of people. We've got almost 100 people on here, and many of whom are new. Have a look at this video from the New Zealand Herald from a few weeks ago.
A nasty stoush has unfolded around Team New Zealand in a bid to keep the America's Cup on home waters. Team New Zealand has seized all communication with Kiwi rich lister Mark Dunphy after an alleged plan was discovered. Team New Zealand boss Grant Dalton claimed Dunphy refused to answer questions the syndicate asked, and that he was involved with possible New York Supreme Court action.
So in simple terms, they were trying to get the New York Yacht Club to effectively attack the Royal Squadron in the New York Supreme Court to get them disqualified, and then bring the New York Yacht Club in as a new challenge of record. I assume to insist that it was in Auckland to try and negotiate the protocol again, and the New York Yacht Club said, we'll have no bar of this. I mean, it was completely devious. It was underhanded.
Dalton said the ordeal had been a massive waste of time.
Opposition offshore will be just looking in here and just laughing at the time that we've had to spend dealing with this.
Dunphy has denied the claims and remained confident the Cup would be defended in Auckland.
This one's got everything that it's just lined up, isn't it? We've got, more than 85% of New Zealanders want to have it here. We've got all the infrastructure built. All the Kiwis want it. The team wants it. The defenders want it. The challengers want it. How can it not happen?
The host for the next Cup is yet to be decided, with Ireland, Spain and Saudi Arabia all in the mix.
Okay, well, that sort of lays the groundwork. Mark, what's the state of play now? Where does this all stand? And then we'll get into some of the details.
Well, first, I should respond to that commentary because it's not right. And the last thing that any of us would want to do is do anything to prejudice a successful defence. And we're not interested at all, really, in just defending here. We're much more interested in winning, not just this time, but again and again and again. And for Team New Zealand to take that position really is uncontrolled and outrageous. The discussion with the New York Yacht Club that I had, I spoke with the Commodore, a very nice man at home, and he was at his home in Rhode Island. He invited me to join him for a discussion, and my interest was principally in whether or not the New York Yacht Club would come to New Zealand, whether they planned to come to New Zealand to challenge. Mm. And that was of interest, and it's still of interest, because I think I know you'd had Hamish Ross, Dr. Hamish Ross, on your show last week. We describe Hamish as our America's Cup purist. He's one of the best, I think, America's Cup lawyers in the world. We're lucky to have a few of them in New Zealand. That we have needed them over the years, as you know yourself, Tom.
Well, Andrew Johns, Jim Farmer, you've got a bunch of bright people, bright yachties.
And, they're all dedicated, as we all are, Kiwis. So we're proud Kiwis, and we really value the America's Cup and the relationship we've had with it. So Hamish or someone had spotted that perhaps the British challenge was not quite as good as it could be from a formal point of view, and so if there are deficiencies in form, those can be cured by having the New York Yacht Club come and challenge. And so I was interested in first in whether the New York Yacht Club did plan to come, and in the event we had the Commodore and I had a long discussion. It went on for an hour and a half or so. Charming man, and told me all sorts of things that we get the thing about the America's Cup. You get talking, and it's a great opportunity to learn things that you have nothing about. So, but the way that Team New Zealand put that was, as I say, uncontrolled, outrageous, really. And but I think the real issue and what underlies that is that for whatever reason, Team New Zealand have apparently got no interest in defending the Cup here, and that determination probably was made, could have been made, Tom, as long ago as 10 years ago. I expect actually that the Team New Zealand plan had been to sail one Cup here, defend the Cup once here, and then take it overseas. And quite why that is, it's not about money, because there's clearly the money here to defend it and win. And there have been all sorts of things said that are just not right. One of the excuses was, or has been, that we made such a hash of it in 2003, and it was underfunded, but that's not true, because we all know what happened in 2003. We were coping, I think, with the loss of the critical part of our team, who had gone to Lingi, and perhaps the people who took over might have been a bit more adventurous with the design than was called for, and sometimes people overreach a bit. That's all fair and love and war, but that's the reason that we lost in 2003. It's not because we didn't have the money. So, but things are being said which are just not right, and you'll know yourself what happened in 2003. I think you said you were here. So.
Yeah, no, I was, and I was with Larry Ellison's team and with Paul Kayard's team in 2000, and we got to the finals of the LBC with Kayard and St. Francis Yacht Club, and then Larry bought essentially Kayard's team, and I went over along with Bruce Farr, and we worked hard for Larry, but in the meantime, Russell Coos, Brad Butterworth, and the rest of the so-called Tight Five had gone to Alinghi, had been hired by Ernesto, and Ernesto came down there in 2003 and won the Cup on the first go. The only time a challenger has won on the first attempt, his or her first attempt. So I agree with you. I think that the Grant Dalton and co, one of his talk, he seems to have gone away from that talking point, by the way, but the point saying, oh, well, we can't have a repeat of 03 where we were underfunded and lost. That's not why they lost. It's lost because Ross Blackman and the rest of the gang, not to blame Ross, could not keep Russell, because Russell said, I want to run the syndicate. He told Sir Peter, we win this thing, I want to stay on, and then I want to be able to run the syndicate. And And obviously Russell has since proven he's quite capable of that. He also had the same set to with Ernesto, because after they won in 2003, he said, well, Ernesto, I want a chunk of this. I want to be able to run this and help shape it in my vision. And Ernesto patted him on the head and said, no, Russell, you go run the team. That's what you're really good at. And I'll run the event with a couple of his boyhood friends and a couple other people. Then ran the event and actually did quite a good job. The 2007 event, for which we were challenger of record, and Hamish and I negotiated a lot of that protocol, yada, yada. It turned out to be quite a good event. So I agree with you. The other point that I think that Daltz keeps making is that, well, we can't run it here in New Zealand because we can't raise the money. But you alone, apparently out of your own pocket, have promised 20 and now 40 million. What does that involve? Is it a loan? Are you underwriting funds from other people? Are you guaranteeing? How does that work?
Well, for today anyway, it's my money. So I'd hope that others who have indicated they would help, other New Zealanders, I must stress, might come and help out, but it hasn't been appropriate to ask anyone to formally do that because of perhaps the troubles that we've got. But so the 40 is from me and my family, and as things go on, when we get into a position where when New Zealand's when Auckland's confirmed as the venue, then I'll be asking those who've said they'd like to help to formalise that. But it'll be, the money will go in the same way it's always gone into the America's Cup. It's a donation, not looking for anything for it, other than to see our team win, and for New Zealand to again showcase all of the skills, talent, technology, our fantastic natural environment, and for New Zealand to have a party along with it. We need one so badly as we come out of COVID. And
well, yeah, you were kind of rooked is a word we might use here in the U.S. So you unfortunately didn't get to have the big party because of COVID now. And I've got Russell Coots's rant later on in the show, his libertarian freedom rant that he did on Facebook a couple days ago. But let's come back to the money, because the team, you got to run an event.
I'd just like to say on that, Tom, that actually comparatively we weren't rooked. I think the event was less successful financially than it might have been, but given the status of everything else elsewhere in the world, we really had for New Zealand a fantastic event. And had you been here, it was a tremendous celebration. I know it was compromised in the early part of it, and no doubt it was incredibly difficult for Team New Zealand and America's Cup event to run, and for all the officials involved and so on. But given what was happening elsewhere in the world, it was fantastic for New Zealand.
Well, exactly. And I don't mean to say it was a terrific event. We watched it on TV. We covered it here. We did watch parties with the live coverage and so on. And considering what was going on at the time, you're right. It was at least the regatta happened. It was one of the few regattas that happened earlier this year. Yeah. And there's still a lot of things. But financially, you didn't have the super yachts. You didn't have all the media that you would have hoped for. You didn't have all the visitors from all the clubs and so on and so forth, as you had in 2003. So it seems to me the government, both the central government in Wellington, where you live, and the city government in Auckland, and the sponsors, and it seems to me the squadron would really want another crack at this in New Zealand sometime sooner than later, rather than run it offshore and risk it never coming back, or at least not coming back in the immediate future.
Well, yeah, it's an opportunity for payback. I live in Auckland, as it happens. I come originally from Wellington, but we need the payback, and our concern, obviously, if it goes offshore, we'll lose, and we're much more likely to lose if it goes offshore. I don't think there's any doubt in the world about that. And if we were to lose, I just can't see how we would ever again be able to mount a challenge, because you talk about the numbers for for Perth, in 1987. But we need a billionaire or two to help us if we lose the cup. Whereas as a holder of the cup, it's comparatively much easier because and the bet's very different, isn't it? You hold the cup. You've got a great history. We've got, you'd say we're on the crest of the wave with our America's Cup eventing, and so to lose it and then have to think about how to win again, it's just unthinkable, really.
Well, I've said on this show any number of times that I maintain the view that if ETNZ and the squadron let ETNZ take the event offshore, they likely will lose the same way that, here's Larry Ellison with all of his resources, Russell Coots with all his determination, cleverness, experience, and they take it out of San Francisco after the very successful 2013 event and go to Bermuda for money reasons because Bermuda offered them $70 million, give or take. And Russell said, okay, let's go do this, Larry, because we can recoup some of your money. And what happened? They promptly lost. He had Jimmy Spithill, they had a design team, they had Grant Simmer, and they lost. And of course, I said at that point, I was Vice Commodore, as you know, of Golden Gate, and I said, guys, you should not take it offshore. Do it here. If we can't do it in San Francisco, we'll do it in San Diego or Newport, Rhode Island, or tell me where. And they said, no, we got a couple other offers. And for money purposes, they took it to Bermuda, and they lost. And I fear ETNZ, I think they will. Fear is maybe the wrong word, but I suspect they will lose if they go offshore. We got north of 100 people on here. There's questions coming from all over the place, from Miami to South America to Europe and down in Australia and New Zealand. One of the questions I got asked ahead of the show, once people knew you were coming on, when I told them on Tuesday, you're willing to, this very generous offer of 40 million Kiwi, how much of that do you think is the total budget? What do you think the team needs to run a successful defense? Not the event, because I think the event will get covered, but what does the team need to run a successful defense in New Zealand?
Well, I've been told by the team what they need. Just wondering, though, if it's appropriate for me to share that because...
well, order of magnitude. No, don't go into details, but do you think they need 80 million? Do you think they need 120 million? Order of magnitude. Let's not, downplay it if you want, but just so people have some idea that you're making a huge, I think, generous offer.
Well, I don't know which currency you're talking, Tom, but I think it's more than 100 million in any event, and there's some of the numbers floating around. 200 million Kiwi for the whole thing, and and the team clearly has the capability to raise, I would think, half of that, perhaps a bit less, and whether it's 200 in total. We know from the last event, AC36, what it cost for the event, because there were reports from everyone, really, from the Challenger record, from the event entity, which is controlled by the Team New Zealand Trust, and those are public documents, and they disclose for the event expenditure of $45 million Kiwis. So, and of the 45 million for the event, 5 million is said to be revenue. Now, I would have thought the revenue could have been very much higher than that, and probably should have been very much higher than that. And that was funded by the government as the 40 million. So the event itself is a wash, and so it's really just about the team. And so you can think of my $40 million commitment as being for the team.
Let me ask you then, because this is the other question. I've had a lot of questions ahead of this, and even now. By the way, people are chiming in. And if Julia were here, she's not, as our FOSIs, I said at the top of the show, Julia's off today, so I don't have her thumbing through all the comments. But she would say at this point, Mark, to be sure to go back and read the comments in replay, and maybe even after a day or so, because people do comment. We leave comments open in replay, and astonishingly, there's no coarse language. There's no personal attacks. People are, they'll state their point. They may vehemently disagree with me or you or whomever is on, but it's well worth going back and looking. One of the comments just came through from a very experienced campaigner, a guy called John Schaefer, who's a FOSI, by the way, a friend of Sailing Illustrated, we call him. Been on the show. He says, Tom, note, offshore is a death sentence. Finance alone, you win because you have so much more or less to spend in traveling around the world and housing and so on. Home defense gets you more time on the water and more boats to build locally. And I totally agree with John Schaefer. But the other question people are asking, if you give this money to Team New Zealand and they get some from sponsors and government, what about all these, we hear that the team, the trust, owes money to various entities, and I don't want to go into Challenger of Record and television and whatever else, and I'm getting pinged almost daily, as is our good friend Magnus Wheatley in the UK, who writes the Rule 69 blog, who's on here watching as well, and he and I compare notes. We're getting pinged by Kiwis who say, well, ask Mr. Dunphy if the money he gives, is that going to go just to the operation of the team for AC37, or could it go to help pay back some of the things that maybe are owed previously by ETNZ from accrued from AC36 and maybe previously?
Well, we would say, well, I would say anyway, that it will go for the next event. And but if there's indebtedness in Team New Zealand that we don't know about, we've said to the team, come clean, tell us about it, because we're trying to help. We're here to help. We're your best supporters. Come on, give us a shot. Give us a shot. And so tell us about it. Come clean with us, please.
Bill Wingrove is saying, and you are in Auckland, I knew that. If I said you were in Wellington a minute ago, your representative who set this up for us, thanks to him. Do you say hi to Charles Finney for me when you see him next? And if he's watching, thank you, Charles. Bill Wingrove down in Florida is saying, Tampa, Florida, if New Zealand keeps the rolling lockdowns, then there will not be an opportunity to have a big event with super yachts and tourists. Yeah, but I think, Bill, that's going to come to an end. The pressure's coming on, and it sounds like they're getting people vaccinated. Kim Pennell, who's down in Auckland, saying he's just said, meaning you, Mark, it is a donation, that you're not looking for anything. You're not looking for a share interest in the trust or the team. Gordon Smith, yes, 40 million New Zealand is a personal donation. You heard it here first. Well, I think we've seen it in the New Zealand press too, Gordon. Thank you for that. Another good friend, Ross Monroe, is on here, another good friend from way back and a keen supporter in times past of Team New Zealand. So what happens next? I mean, Daltz has said he is cutting off communications, not going to talk to you. We know there's an AGM at the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron coming up, virtual or otherwise, and there's pressure on the leadership there, on the so-called General Committee, to just say, hey, it's going to be here. And we know that Jim Farmer, QC, has said, and I broke that news here on the show, and then on Tuesday and aired it with Hamish at some length, he said, if they go to Jeddah, if the squadron lets ETNZ go to Jeddah because of the human rights issues there, he's going to sue personally, and he's got plenty of dough, as you know. I've been good friends with Jim since forever, and he's not only one of your top lawyers in the country, but he's got plenty of dough, and he's going to personally sue the squadron. And if that happens, if Daltz goes to Jeddah with this, and then Jim Farmer goes to court, whether in New York or in your local courts, and I guess he's got an angle because of the precedent of the All Blacks during the apartheid era to actually take to your high court in New Zealand. This thing isn't going to happen anytime soon. This is a bad deal all around. Do you think Team New Zealand and the squadron understand the risk that they're running by taking it offshore, legally and otherwise?
Well, I don't think it'll go offshore. I think we will prevail. I think when you're right, normally things go the way that they're supposed to. And I think there'll be a wake-up call of some sort or other, and the event will occur here, will defend here. And I hope it's in 2024 rather than 2025. But, because if you're lying in your bed at night, if you're a Team New Zealand or a squadron, or any of the parties that is more in touch with this decision than perhaps some of us sitting around the outside, you'd have to be thinking, if I was a member of the New York Yacht Club and I'd been successful with this cup, I'd won in Bermuda and I'd defended successfully in Rhode Island, and the skipper of my sailing team said to me, you know what, Commodore, we should take this event to Jeddah because it'll be easier for us to raise the money if we do that. And you can't imagine that the New York Yacht Club would have a bar of that. And equally, if the New York Yacht Club, if the proposition wasn't to go to Jeddah but to go to Cowes, for example, to say, well, actually, you know what, our challenger record would be happy for us to go and defend the cup in their home waters. What do you think about that, Mr. Commodore of New York? And I think if that was a proposition that the Commodore of New York was seriously entertaining, I think the whole of the committee of the New York Yacht Club would be sacked. Mm. And so if you're as I say, closer to the decision than those of us sitting very closely around the outside of the tent, and you're thinking about whether you're doing the right thing, at some point the penny's going to drop, and you'll think, you know what, the right thing for us to do is to defend it in New Zealand, because all of our people deserve it. They've paid for it. And actually, we're the constructive trustees for all of New Zealand in this. And it's absolutely the wrong thing to do to go offshore. And even to be wasting the time thinking about it it's high heresy in a way.
Well, that's really a lot of the concern of all the other teams. That's why we haven't heard anything from Patrizio. He's waiting to see what happens. New York, as you know, have already called a pause, meaning they're not going to participate in 37, and I think that's firm and final. Chris Culver, with whom you spoke, Commodore Culver, is only going to serve one term, and Paul Zabatakis is becoming Commodore here. He's already acting Commodore, and he will be confirmed at the AGM in December. We're going to talk some more about that because we have a Bravo Zulu for New York also, because they're nominating a woman, as I broke that news on my Facebook page a couple days ago. And that's great news, too, for the sport. But back to Auckland, you have a lot of comments, questions, and Matthias Collins is saying thank you he's down in South America, one of our regular watchers and a great sailor, Soling sailor, an Olympian, and so on. And he and others are asking, you some time ago said that for you to come in and contribute a big, that's a big sum, a tidy sum, 40 million Kiwi, and help raise more, and help bring the government back to the table and help make all this happen. At one point, you said Grant Dalton has to go as the leader of Team New Zealand. Did you say that? Did you mean that? Is that still your position, or are you just saying he's got to get out of running the event and stick to his knitting with running the team?
I'm the greatest supporter of Team New Zealand, and well, I wouldn't say I was the greatest supporter, but I think the line of the greatest supporters of Team New Zealand, there are many, many, many of us, and we think the job that this team has done, from the time that they left San Francisco, it was a shame that we fell off the log a bit there, but obviously winning in Bermuda and defending successfully here, we just rate this team so highly, and that's everyone on the team. There's no wouldn't make any bones about it, and but we. The point of saying that there would need to be change of this comparative idiocy of taking the cup offshore for defence. The point was that if that was really truly what was being planned, surely there should be change. And so my point in saying that was just to make it clear how strongly the rest of us feel about that.
It is Daltz taking it offshore to raise money, not only for the team, but also to have a good payday for himself, do you think?
I've got absolutely no idea, Tom, but I suggest you invite him on your show and ask him.
Well, I have. There's a standing invitation. And you probably know Russell Green, who is his lawyer. And by the way, I've seen the letter. I don't know if you have, that Russell Green has sent a day or so ago. And I'm not going to run it on here because we don't need to air a lot of back and forth, he said, she said, and finger pointing. But Russell Green and I are longtime friends. He was a bit of a protege of mine when we got him into judging and umpiring. He's a superb judge and umpire in our sport and yacht racing. And we did a couple of cup campaigns together. And he's a bright guy. He's been on the show, and the invitation remains to Russell. It's open. I'd love to have Russell on. We've had Dan Bernasconi on the show. Love to have Daltz on the show anytime. And in a non-adversarial, because I think the job Daltz has done, it's an amazing run, as you say, going back to you and Sir Michael Fay and David Richwhite, and then that whole Kiwi, the Kiwis have dominated the Cup. You had a bad go here in 2013, but really since Russell won it skippering in San Diego in '95, I was with Dennis Connor's team then and watched them trounce us 5-0. And since then, the Kiwis, other than the 03 incursion by Alinghi, as you say, we know what happened. We know what happened here in 13. But the turnaround of Bermuda, the job that the gang did there, Pete Burling and Blair Tuke, and it's astonishing. And Grant Dalton has been at the heart and soul of that. I've been critical of you for whatever comment came out because I said, yeah, let's get Mr. Dunphy and the others to run the event. Grant's wearing too many hats. He can't be. Even Russell didn't try to run the event and run the team. You know, he kept his fingers, but he wasn't the CEO and the chairman of the board. And he's wearing too many hats in my never so humble opinion. And I thought you were right to say that he should not be running the event. Plenty of people in New Zealand that know how to run a yacht race and an America's Cup event. And then he should stick to his knitting with the team and successfully defend again with the help of you and others that are willing to give money and sponsorship and so on. But I don't understand why I still don't understand the motivation. Oh, we got to go offshore to raise money for the team. You mean because Jeddah is going to pay a big chunk of money into the team budget as well as hosting the event? I think that's mistaken. I don't think that'll happen. And a lot of the FOSI on here commenting don't think that'll happen. We know that Cork have already said, excuse me, we need another 6 months to look at this and then some. We know, I lived in Spain, so I've got pretty strong connections there with the gang up in Madrid as well as in Valencia and the other town that's being talked about. Spain isn't going to host this thing anytime soon, and if they do, they'll pay the hosting costs. They're not going to pay a big chunk into Team New Zealand or into Sir Keith Mills' company, Origin Sports, just for the right of hosting this event, especially in this era that we're living in, this COVID era or post-COVID era or whatever it is. I don't see the motivation. Tell me again, what is the possible motivation, if other than money, for going offshore?
Well, I'd just like to pick up on a couple of points there, Tom. Talking about the great success that New Zealand's had, and particularly the sailors who've gone on to do great things. Just about all of the people that you mentioned were part of the original Fremantle campaign. And I think, if you look at Team New Zealand now, you'd see amongst they have this Type 5 expression, there's still a pretty solid core of those who have their genesis in Fremantle. So, and obviously Russell Coates was there and Brad Butterworth were there, and it's really interesting to look back at that team and see what they've all gone and done, and actually, then you say, okay, well, how many of these are in the America's Cup Hall of Fame? And actually, quite a few. So, look, it's been a journey, and it's going to be a 40-year journey by the time we get to the next event. The comments that you make about perhaps separating the event in terms of management from the team, that's a sensible proposition, because I think perhaps the issue of I've had only one discussion with Grant Dalton, and that lasted for perhaps an hour and a half or an hour and a quarter, thought it had gone quite well actually, but it didn't take long before he was stoning me, throwing bricks at me.
He has issued some pretty tough press releases, both with respect to you and New York Yacht Club and Hamish Ross even.
Oh, well, look, it's, different people have got different styles, but, sticks and stones, all that stuff. I mean, you can get away with it for a while, and people will put up with it for a while, but at a point, people will not put up with that sort of nonsense. But anyway, just parking that, I think there is considerable merit actually in there being, a separation of the event from the team. Don't think it means that necessarily would involve a loss of control. It should actually involve more revenue, and one would think, provided the revenue went ultimately towards the team, subject to whatever the protocol says, that you'd be right behind that. I mean, I can see, we can all see if we read the events, the reports from AC36 and all of the press. There was some awful press through AC36 about the event company and the relationship with the government and whistleblowers and all this sort of thing. And it would simplify life, and actually simplify life for the team, and significantly, I would say, increase New Zealand's chance of succeeding if there were some sensible steps taken there. And what troubles me really is there perhaps isn't the independent governance that one might expect to see in the club rooms of the team. And perhaps if you look at how Team New Zealand's controlled, there's a trust which was set up for Peter Blake, the late Sir Peter Blake, and before his successful challenge in San Diego in, I think, 1993. And the trust was set up about then anyway, 1992, 1993. And there are two trustees of that trust, the current leader of Team New Zealand and a long-time lawyer. And I understand that Greg Horton, his name is, that he plans to resign. So, it's a good time to be talking about governance of the team and quite how we ensure that the right thing happens there. How one ensures that's something not for now, but one senses that with what we want most of all is for Team New Zealand to have all of the support that it deserves, and for us to go forward and succeed as we should do in AC37, and do it again and again if we can, and establish such. We've already got a stellar reputation, but it can be even better, and it's sitting there waiting for us.
Do you think it's possible that Daltz is just playing the ultimate chess match here, he's doing a consummate job of saying, oh, we're going to go to Cork, we're going to go to Valencia or someplace else in Spain, oh, we're going to go to Jeddah, and my God, everybody's freaking out about Jeddah. And what he's really doing is getting people like you to the table, offering 40 million Kiwi, my goodness. And the government is saying, hey, we really probably ought to get back involved in this, and the squadron's starting to take notice, yeah, maybe we ought to bring it back here. And that this is just his ultimate strategy, is to get everybody in New Zealand engaged to get behind the defense. Or is that, am I reading that, is that just blue fairy madness?
Could be. Look, it could be. It's at least possible that that's his modus operandi. It's sort of a reasonably hostile modus operandi, and it'll only succeed for so long because people will get sick of that. And in fact, could say that we're sick of it now.
Well, I'm just, having been through, you've been to every cup except, I guess, the D to Gift match in 2010, right? You were.
I wasn't at Bermuda, but I've been to every other match. So, well, I've not ever had the privilege of going to Rhode Island. It would have been a great thing to be there when Bondi won. But,
It was, I mean, 83 was fabulous that night, and the tension that whole summer was marvelous. Newport is a great place to do it. And, I regret New York pausing because we'd all like to go back there at some point, but be that as it may, I just, having been through the 88 deed of gift match and doing battle with Sir Michael, by the way, give him my best regards and Andrew Johns if and when you see them both. Because even though we were adversaries, as I told you in the tech check, we came out of that as good friends. And I've been out to the island 3 times in his helicopter, and we've had a lot of dinners here, there, and everywhere. So at the end of the day, I think we all, including especially you, have the best interest of the sport at heart. I hope and think Grant Dalton and Russell Green and the rest of them do as well. And I just hope people will come to their senses. Because if not, having been through, as I was saying, 88 and then the 2010 deed of gift matches, which took years in court before and after, I'm just afraid this thing's going to get tied up in court, especially because Jim Farmer is, the guy means what he says and says what he means. He's tough and bright, and this thing's going to be bad for the sport, bad for the squadron, bad for the Cup, if it just doesn't go back and settle in nicely in Auckland, in my as I said, humble opinion.
Yeah, well, I'd hasten to say that first, that I wouldn't want to be on the other side of Jim, but second, that
has it true? Excuse me, he's represented you in some non.
Yeah, he's done a wonderful job for me over the years, and I hugely respect his judgment and his intellect, but I'm not part of Jim wants to go off and get the sword out and take it to court. Good luck to him, but that's not my bag. I'm not here to see this thing go to court. It's such a nonsense for it to happen, and I find even talk of it a bit off-putting in a way.
What of the news, just changing the subject back to the team, what of the news of hiring Nathan Outeridge, this news that broke yesterday? We've been saying on the show again for weeks that, Nathan, because we knew that Pete and Blair had not signed, we knew that they were talking with Alinghi, and Magnus Wheatley, who's, as I said, is also on here. We trade notes. And I said, well, Nathan Outeridge, who's married to Emma Blackman, who's Ross's daughter, and has been living in New Zealand now for years, it qualifies under whatever, in any conceivable nationality rule, including the one that has been articulated by Grant and by Sir Jim Ratcliffe as being the rule they expect to have in place in the protocol when it gets announced in hopefully a 3 weeks' time now. What do you think of them hiring Nathan Outeridge? Is that just a backup, or is that adding strength to the team? Do you think Blair and Pete will come back, or do you think they're gone?
Well, first, I'd say that I'm not in touch with any of the sailing team. When I spoke with the Commodore of the New Zealand Squadron last week, he asked me whether I'd spoken with Shoebridge and Kevin Shoebridge and so on. I said, look, I just don't see it as my role to tangle in what really is Team New Zealand's business. On the topic of the hiring, I think that this looks like a fabulous thing for Team New Zealand to bring Nathan into the fold. He looks like he's a tremendous sailor, and no doubt the more strength that New Zealand has in the sailing team, the better. We're obviously. Peter Burling and Blair Tuke are, national heroes, and being able to do what they did in Bermuda and then defend successfully here, and it looks like the way that this Cup is going to go down from a design point of view is that these smaller boats, so the AC40s, whatever they're called, might be used as the sort of the KZ3 and KZ5 of Fremantle, if you can take that analogy, and obviously to have first class skippers on each of those, and wing trimmers or whatever you call them.
That's part of the concern, is that adding those two events adds to the cost of operating the team and maybe the event, but for team costs, but also the whole overall. People say the Cup's just overwrought. We're kind of at a period where we were at the turn of the last century, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where the boats got too big, too technologically complex, reliance, the huge, it was just the biggest boat that ever competed in the Cup, and on, and that the whole Cup needs to be downsized. But I hope and think the Kiwis will do that. I hope it ends up back in New Zealand. I agree with you. I have a pretty strong feeling it will, one way or another, end up back there. I salute you for your efforts. I got to ask you this one question. We're getting, you got to go back and read the questions and the comments, because their people are respectful. One comment I wanted you to react to: Daltz is ensuring that ETNZ win the next Cup. The disgruntled Mr. Dunphy wants to take control of the event because he doesn't like Mr. Dalton. Your reaction?
Well, that's a bit unkind, that question. Not that I don't like Mr. Dalton. I hugely respect him, and I definitely don't want to take control of the event. So there are fantastic events managers who could run the event. I was responding and saying that, Tom, to your suggestion that would be a good idea, and I think it is a good idea. But
to split the responsibilities between the team and the event.
But I don't want to have control of anything. I've got more than enough to do in my day job without having to have anything to do with the America's Cup, save for just going back. We were sitting around a dinner table in Auckland after we had succeeded in defending the Cup. It was 2 months in.
And this year in March.
Yeah, this year it was. So it would have been in May, and a discussion amongst 8 of us about the Cup going offshore, and we were saying that surely that is just completely unnecessary. Why would we be doing it? Oh, it's because of the money. And I said, well, it's not about the money. And so anyway, rather than just have the discussion at the dinner table and let it pass, I spoke with Jim Farmer and said, Jim, who's doing anything about it? And he said, well, I don't think anyone is. So one thing led to another, and Jim took me down to the squadron, and we had a chat, and the squadron said, look, can you help us? Can you help us? Because we need help. And they'd had a public meeting where they were calling for help, and I said, look, I'm sure I can help. I know how to raise money. I've done it, when I was a banker, I was very successful at raising money for different things. And, there are lots of people who feel the way I do about the America's Cup. So I'm here just to help, just to raise the money and to get this thing off to the races. And obviously to see us, for the team to have whatever they need to succeed. We don't want to have a half-baked go at it. And then I'm out. But out save for the the fact that we don't want to have to do this again. So the arrangements that we put in place for the AC37 defence should have enough of a form around them that they can be applied again for AC38. So we don't get into this terrible time-wasting, energy-wasting process that we're in at the moment.
Well, and it's tough. That's why we don't have any challengers. That's why people are sitting around waiting what's going on. If there had just been an announcement, hey, we're going to, as New York used to do during what turned out to be the heyday of the Cup, they'd say they issued what was called the memorandum. This is before we started calling it the protocol. When I first wrote a protocol, and that sounded like a good diplomatic word to me, so I called it the protocol for the 92 Cup. And they, New York Yacht Club, issued the thing called the memorandum, say, if we successfully defend, it's our intention to run it here in Newport, Rhode Island in 3 years' time in 12 meters. And we'll see who the challenger is. And because we were in boats that were affordable and reasonable, people who were there watching the Cup and said, hey, we think we might want to do this. We think we can raise the money. They'd buy a used 12. This happened in the IACC in the next year of the big monohulls. You could kick the tires. You could buy a used boat from one of the teams, and even then maybe not have a chance of winning the next time around, but you could enter as a challenger, as South Africa did, Shosholoza, for example. And I think people miss those days. I think people think that it's gotten, the cup's just overwrought and it's not relatable to the general population and general public, and let alone the sailing public. I've kept you for. Go ahead.
You see, Tom, behind me, the image of KZ1 and Big Boat and
88 campaign, and
that was actually that Big Boat challenge arose because after Dennis Conner and the San Diego Club won in Fremantle, they were prevaricating about where the defence would be held, and Michael and Dave were getting a bit frustrated with that because they felt like probably felt a bit like we had the capability to win in Fremantle and hadn't executed it properly, and that led to the Big Boat Challenge, and that in itself led to, I think you would say, I hope you'd say, a different class of yacht being sailed for the America's Cup.
Yeah, it did, by all means.
And so, in some ways, we're going to muck you around, we're not going to tell you when we're going to defend it, and all of this uncertainty will lead to change. If there's not some certainty, then there will be change.
That's a really good point. And of course, I was hired just about that time, right after Michael and Andrew went and dropped the challenge in early July on the lunch table of the then Commodore Fred Fry, Dr. Fred Fry at San Diego Yacht Club, and then I ended up running the 88 Cup and the court cases and so on. But you're absolutely right. It was because of the perceived dithering, and there was a big internal fight between the club and the syndicate, between Dennis's Sail America, over where to host it, whether to do it in San Diego, whether to do it in Hawaii, which is where Dennis had trained, and on what basis, and who was going to be in charge of it. But that's a really good point, Mark, that dithering is what caused the 88 thing to happen, and that's what caused Sir Michael and Andrew Johns and Bruce Farr to say, hey, we can do this. And Andrew read the deed and said, well, look, we don't have to wait. We can just file a challenge and give 10 months notice of challenge. And San Diego said, no, we've got 9 or 10 or 20 other challenges here and there, which they did, and they had expressions of interest. And when I got there and collected them all and said, excuse me, there's only one that's valid here. I took advice from lawyers in New York and others, and I said, you got a valid challenge. We got to defend this. And others did too. And that's when San Diego kind of came to reality and got on with it. Sir, I've kept you for an hour and 6 minutes now, and I really appreciate your coming on, Mark Dunphy. Anything in final thoughts?
Well, I really appreciate you having me, Tom. And I was hoping I might have seen Julia today because she's always seemed to be such I've seen your show a few times, and she's always been so bubbly. So I'm really thinking about her and her big school reunion. Did you say it was her 65th?
Yeah, it's her 65th, and she's probably watching this and appreciates very much your comment. She'd be sitting over there, of course, at the table, reading through the comments and shaking her finger at me when I go astray, and filling in for me when my senior brain starts to have a brain fart. But Julia, we'll get you on again, and maybe if we get Daltz on or Russell Green or whomever, maybe Aaron Young, Commodore Aaron Young. But we appreciate you helping us to understand you and your background and what your interests are, and hopefully get you on again soon.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you to have me, Tom.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark, very much. Ciao. From Auckland, New Zealand, live via Skype, Mark Dunphy, whom I just met. We had a tech check an hour before we went to air today, and I really appreciate him coming on. And by your comments, we've got over 100 people watching. And Andrew Pindar, then the comment, then I'm out, I understand. But winning and holding on to the cup requires relentless attempts and involvement. Love him or otherwise, Daltz is in up to the hilt, and I suspect that an inadequate budget is what wins and holds the cup. Yeah. I agree. And Andrew Pindar, who's a FOSI, as you all know, has been on this show. I really think going offshore is the kiss of death. I don't think people understand how much support there is, what a big advantage it is to have home court, home field advantage in the Cup. And again, I don't have. I'm not very smart, but I watch the history, and I can put 2 and 2 together and usually come up with 4, maybe 5. And you just have to look to see what happened to Russell and Larry when they went to Bermuda. And some people say, well, they must have intentionally tried to lose it, because you got Russell's very, he's clever, he's smart, he's experienced, and you got Larry's resources, and they managed to lose it. Well, it was tough in Bermuda for Oracle Team USA. The Bermudans were cheering for the Brits and for the Kiwis. The Commonwealth was sticking together. So I say no more. Enough of all that. I do want to revisit this article we told you about on Tuesday, because it is relevant. And I mentioned it a bit. We covered Jim Farmer, but this was the headline on a few days ago in the New Zealand Herald, in an article by Hamish Rutherford. Former TNZ director warns he will sue if Saudi Arabia names the next host. Maybe Saudi Arabia is not going to be named. That'd be great if it wasn't. And Jim Farmer, QC, who is a senior legal powerhouse in New Zealand and beyond, wrote us, I'm not going to reprise this letter, but wrote a strong letter to the Commodore, Aaron Young, the Commodore of the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron. And I just go to the quick, the last 3 paragraphs. I would therefore respectfully seek your assurance and that of the flag officers that the squadron will not countenance Team New Zealand entering into arrangements which have the purpose or effect of the next defense being conducted in Saudi Arabia. In the event that you are not able to give that assurance, and TNZ does determine that Jeddah will be selected as the venue, I will personally, and he's got the wherewithal to do it, I will personally take high court proceedings to prevent the implementation of that decision. I'm sorry to write in this vein, but it was a gross error of judgment for Jeddah to be put on the short list in the first place, so said Jim Farmer in his letter to the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron Commodore Aaron Young. So that's at the forefront of what everybody's concern is. And why don't we just, okay, I understand there's some hard feelings between various people, but Mr. Dunphy seems like a reasonable guy. Anybody that says, I'll give you $40 million, and he's got the wherewithal to do it, and why they can't sit down and come up with something in New Zealand between the governments of the central government and Auckland and Mr. Dunphy and his other people, and say, well, he doesn't have anybody else, he's talking through his hat. I don't think so. I think he's got serious backing, and I think Grant Dalton is a very smart boy who can figure out how to run this and win it again in Auckland, because he's got at least one really tough challenger coming at him, and that's Ineos Team UK. This boat, of course, is the boat of Jim Farmer. That's Georgia. He is a champion yachtsman in his own right. But here's the challenger of record signing the protocol with Aaron Young, the Commodore of the squadron, right after they successfully defended, that is ETNZ/Royal New Zealand. And he replied to Jim Farmer's letter. He said, we quote down there in that second paragraph, we have not yet been asked to consider Saudi Arabia as a venue for the America's Cup. If we are asked to consider it, I can assure you that our consideration will be objective and thorough. That was the Commodore of the squadron replying to Jim Farmer. And I aired that Tuesday when we had Hamish Ross, the lawyer extraordinaire, Dr. Hamish Ross, on, and he said that's great news. You can't ask the squadron to say much more than that, but he hopes Hamish and others think that the squadron needs to exercise their fiduciary duty and not just delegate it carte blanche to ETNZ to run, in effect, the America's Cup under the deed of gift, because the deed is quite clear that the cup is in trust to the yacht club that wins it, not to an owner of the yacht or the skipper or anybody else. Okay. Commodores Aaron Young and Bertie Bickett of the Royal Yacht Squadron. I think that whole Royal Yacht Squadron thing is dead. Brad Reeves asked a question, and we covered that early on. Yes, he did. Mr. Dunphy did talk, he said, for an hour and a half with Commodore Chris Culver of New York Yacht Club, and of course that didn't result in any action by New York, nor should have it. I was aware that those discussions were taking place. I didn't know about Mark talking to Commodore Culver, but I knew that Hamish Ross was in the mix and was considering whether or not the Royal Yacht Squadron should or should not be considered a viable challenger. I think that's That's a non-issue. I've been saying that all along. If you want to see what Hamish thinks, go back and watch our show, which had over 2,500 views from Tuesday. And all of our shows are on this Facebook page. And you can go to Sailing Illustrated blog, fb.com/Sailing Illustrated blog/live. And all of our previous 465 shows are there. And if at this point I would say to Julia, okay, and she, of course, is not here, probably watching in the car driving down to her high school reunion, Janice Davis, my beloved mother in Ann Arbor, Michigan, say, I like your jack-o'-lantern. It's still like to see your Halloween costume. Yes, well, thank you, Mom. We don't need to talk that. Matthias Collins, Tom, are you using complex numbers to get 5? Okay. Gordon Smith, okay, Tom, it's Dalt's call as to where he wants to sail his match. Let him get on with it. No, Gordon Smith, I'm sorry. It's not Dalt's call. The venue is decided by the defender. The defender is the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron. They make the call. Now, they can rubber stamp something that's a recommendation from their team, but they can't just simply delegate and stand by and say, hey, we've delegated that to the team, the finances and the decisions, and we'll just, whatever they decide, they decide. They have got the responsibility. They've got the fiduciary duty. They owe the fiduciary duty as the defending yacht club to make that and other decisions in connection with the Cup. So that's not quite right. Kim Pennell down in Auckland saying it's not Dalt's, yes, match or call. Correct, Kim. Exactly. Andrew Dolly Davola, the Saudis can hand over a check and New Zealand write a number. Yeah, they can. Here's what I'm hearing back, and again, Magnus is on here. One of the things people are hearing is that the Saudis didn't realize, they thought this was a little bit like Formula One. You come to Saudi Arabia in December for their first ever hosting of an F1 Grand Prix around that big, beautiful circuit right on the waterfront. They thought, well, they come down here and the roadies come the weekend before with the stuff, and then the team starts to filter in Wednesday and Thursday, and they have a practice day on Friday, and they have qualies on Saturday, and then they race on Sunday, and then they're out of here on their private jet Sunday night. That's not the way the Cup works, as you all know. You move there, you carry on. Oh, you move there? How many people? Well, you move a lot of people there, each of the teams. Oh, really? How long do they live here? Well, they might want to be here a year or maybe 2 in advance of the Cup. Oh, really? I think Saudi Arabia is maybe, and maybe Julie Ahrens, who's on here commenting, and say, hey, it's not going to be in Saudi Arabia. And one other thing in defense of Grant Dalton, he has said, and Aaron Young have said, the timing of the next Cup, they can decide to hold it a year or 2 later. Then, everybody's assuming 2024. I'm not. I'm already assuming it's 2025. There's no Olympics in 2025. And, they're running out of time because of this venue back and forth. But who's not going to be too happy about that, maybe? Ineos Britannia, as they're now called. Because what's their burn rate? They've got the F1 design team. They've got their sailing team. What are they burning? Are they burning £1 million a month? Are they burning more than that? And they're not going to want this thing to go on and on and on. They're going to want their crack at the Cup sooner than later. So we'll see. Any other questions or comments on this topic before we move along? A lot of folks on here. Thanks to all of you who have joined us for this show number 466. And Julie and I keep talking about whether we do this beyond 500, but we will, I suspect. Maybe we'll cut to 1 a week. I don't know. AC37 Cup date is up next, and as you know, the venue decision is still in abeyance. The AP, the postponement flag, as we use it in our sport, is still displayed figuratively at virtually at the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron. But the big news we touched on with Mark Dunphy is that Nathan Outeridge has been signed to the team. We've been telling you this for weeks, that this was going to happen, or was well within the realm of possibility. I didn't know that they had done a deal or were about to do a deal, but I'm not at all surprised. Unlike everybody else who says, oh, we're so surprised that this happened. Come on. You got Pete and Blair, who haven't signed, who are out and about doing their Sail GP thing, maybe being romanced by some other people, maybe Ernesto Bertarelli, maybe not. But Nathan has signed. He's been doing television commentary. He's far too good a sailor to be sitting on the sidelines of the Cup. He's sailing for Japan in Sail GP, so there's no surprise at all to me that he has now been signed because, as we said, he's married to Emma Blackman. He's been living in New Zealand since years, Emma Blackman, who's a Kiwi, whose dad Ross ran the team, ETNZ, way back in the 2000 Cup. And he has signed for AC37. Team New Zealand spokesman said, Nathan is being brought in to strengthen our team, and there are a number of roles he can fill. Remember, they got another Aussie, Nathan, originally from Australia, but Glenn Ashby, who's an Australian, who's now been living in New Zealand. But, you know, there's some eyebrows raised. What do you mean the Kiwis are bringing in Aussies to help our America's Cup team? Well, that's completely appropriate, I think. Why not? Trans-Tasman defense, especially if they do it in Auckland. Maybe they'll run the defense up in Sydney. Wouldn't that be something? Well, we can't seem to raise the money here, but there's some Australian corporations, and Sydney gets behind it. They go across the Tasman and run it up there. That's the picture of Julia. We're sitting in her chair. The immediate reaction, this is from the New Zealand Herald, Paul Lewis writing, the immediate reaction is to think this is a covering move. I don't think he knew he was using a sailing term, but maybe he did. A covering move should the two key members of the Team New Zealand afterguard not re-sign for the next regatta, which has yet to find a venue. Quote, this is part of an effort to lift our performance as a sailing team, and we want Pete and Blair to be part of that, of course, unquote, said a spokesman for the team. I think that was Kevin Shoebridge. Quote, but I don't know for sure. Quote, we know from our review that the sailing team has to improve if we are to pull off this three-peat. Nathan is being brought in to strengthen our team, and there are a number of roles he can fill. As you heard said there, that's Paul Lewis writing in the New Zealand Herald. Now, what about Pete and Blair, to say nothing of the two great Finn sailors with that team as well? Well, Pete and Blair, according to this same article, Paul Lewis saying, however, Burling and Tukes' latest statement, reported in stuff.co.nz, may muddy the waters within Team New Zealand. The pair said Outeridge is, quote, a great sailor, unquote, and a positive addition to the team. Quote, although we haven't yet re-signed for the next Cup campaign, we have been involved with the team since we won the Cup in March, and they have been won years. They've been on a retainer since then, a small retainer to keep them close at hand. So what are they doing? Well, as you know, they are sailing for New Zealand in Sail GP. Haven't been doing particularly well, but it's only a matter of time as they get their boat up to speed. Pete and Blair are the co-CEOs of the Kiwi Sail GP team. There was to be an event in Christchurch. That's not happening. Next event is in Sydney, I think the second weekend of December. And then the final event here in San Francisco next May? I can't remember. So the final quote from that article, quote, this is from the guys, from Pete and Blair, quote, we've committed to telling the critical ocean and climate story through our sailing careers, and we need to make choices that will allow us to step up to this ambition, which meaning, I guess, Sail GP. Obviously, we have concerns about the suitability of Jeddah, which we have expressed to the team over the past few months. We are continuing to talk with the team as they work through the details before we make any decisions. So that's as much as we know about the Pete and Blair situation. It's Saturday morning down there. I haven't seen any newspaper articles from New Zealand, but we'll see what is going on as the weekend progresses. Maybe there'll be some articles in the Sunday papers.